Hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Restring Sunday, the series where I take a guitar, talk a bit about it, restring it, and play it. Now, I hope you can forgive me, but I've missed the last few Sundays. It's really hot. Restring Sundays are shot outside in what is essentially a greenhouse. So during a heat wave, that's not great for humans or camera gear. It shuts off, it overheats. So sorry about that. I'm recording in the evening now, it's a little bit cooler. Let's take a look at this guitar. This is a BC Rich Mockingbird Special X. These came out in 2010 and were BC Rich's attempt to be a Les Paul Mockingbird. And in fairness, they did everything right for them to be, but they weren't as successful as I think they were hoping they would be. Over the 6 or so years that these were in production, they varied in spec and place that they were manufactured. They started out in Korea and then ended up being manufactured in China. This is a Chinese Mockingbird. Let's get restringing. Today we're doing D'Addario standard 10 to 46, and I bought the bulk box because I'm doing a lot of restrings. I always wanted to know what was inside this pizza box. The strings are in this hose, so they're protected from oxidization. Take off the rubber cap, and you've got all your strings. For the player's circle code, a viewer sent in a code that he wanted to give away, so shout out to him. There's the code on screen. Whoever gets it, gets it. So I got this guitar for my 16th birthday. I had played it before, and it was a surprise birthday gift from my parents. And I've used this guitar for some session playing live and recording on an album as well. Now let's get to the strange bit, the bit that makes this stand out from just about every other BC Rich there is. The pickups. Back when this guitar was made, BC Rich was owned by Hanser Music Group. And Hanser Music Group owned custom amps and they had Rockfield pickups. And this guitar came with Rockfield pickups. They were humbuckers, they were supposed to be like kind of paths, but they were bad. They didn't sound good. I really didn't like them. But I liked playing the guitar. I just thought the pickups really brought it down a bit. So I wanted to change them. I'm just going to polish the frets on this because it's a little bit tarnished. So anyway, I really didn't like the pickups and I wanted them changed. And I could have changed them for a set of humbuckers and it would have sounded like a humbucker guitar. But if you've watched a few of my videos, you might know that I like guitars to be just a little bit different. So I decided to make this guitar just a little bit different and went for some P90 humbuckers made from a guy in, I think it's Manchester, called the Creamery. They seemed like good value, they were humbucker sized P90s, and it made it so that this guitar was a P90 guitar, and I didn't have a full P90 guitar. If you don't know, the best way to think of a P90 is kind of a mix between a single coil and a humbucker pickup. They're technically single coils, they're one winding, one coil, but the magnet is different from standard single coils, and there's a lot more winding that can be done because of the size of the pickup. So you can overwind them, they'll be hotter than single coils. Again, the best way to think of them is a mixture between humbucker and single coil. They don't really sound like either, it's a different sound. This is just to get rid of the leftover steel wool so it doesn't go on the pickups. Just a little bit of tacky tape. The thing is, P90s really are used for blues and maybe a little bit of classic rock. But they don't have to be. You can really use them for anything. They're fairly versatile. Like, you can shred on single coils and you can shred on humbuckers, but most people don't use P90s to do it, which is kind of strange because it's the mixture between both and they sound quite nice. So the specs of this guitar are pretty similar to a Les Paul, or at least in comparison to a standard Mockingbird. The scale length is 24 3/4 inches, and the overall layout of the guitar is very Les Paul-esque. You've got the selector switch up at the top horn of the body, you've got the two-tone, two-volume setup, and the tune-o-matic and stop tailpiece. So it kind of feels like a BC Rich Les Paul, which I think is kind of cool, but it was this weird middle ground where the BC Rich guys didn't really want a BC Rich Les Paul, and the Gibson guys didn't really want a BC Rich Les Paul either. So it sat in this strange purgatory of an unusual guitar. You might look at this shape and think it's a wild metal guitar, but the original Mockingbird came out in 1976, and it's kind of the classic BC Rich shape alongside the Eagle and the Bitch, which were also 70s guitars. They didn't really reach their heyday until the 80s, where they took the same shapes and painted them wild colours, which I also think are very cool. But the Mockingbird is kind of a classic guitar shape. Now, whether people choose to accept that or not is a different question. The ownership of BC Rich that made this guitar sold BC Rich off, and they sold it off to another company which changed everything, and BC Rich disappeared. Now, they are currently back under a different ownership that has some ties, as far as I'm aware, to the ownership that made this guitar. And this is quite a nice guitar. I like it, at least. So I'd be interested to see what some of the new ones are like. They did opt to use a lot of abalone on some of the models, which I can't say I'm a huge fan of, but some of the guitars without that I think look kind of cool. Now, the bridge and stop tailpiece are Tone Pros, which means that they're locked in with Allen keys for tone. I'm not sure how much that affects things, but we're going to top wrap this bridge. I think it's just an aesthetic choice, and all the blues dads love a good top wrapped tailpiece, so we'll do it, and I'll show you how I do it anyway. So the first thing that we're going to need is, this is the end of the string that we cut off. We're going to need to take this ball end off. I'm going to snip the windings here, and then it'll come off. Simple. And why did we need that? Well, I'll show you when we're putting on our new strings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ball end and I'm going to thread it through onto the string that I'm going to be putting on. It's going to look like this. Now when I thread it through, this little spacer allows this ball end just to poke through at the end, and that way I don't have a winding sticking up at the back of the bridge and there's nothing to catch my hand on. That's a Joe Bonamassa trick, so shout out Joe. There's one thing that I don't like about this guitar, and it's the tuners. These are the BC Rich Grovers, and they've got the steps on them. They really don't fit any winder. I have to use this one, and I have to use the bass part of it, because that's the only thing that fits. I personally think that it's just a bit too much of a pain to go through for ornamentation that changes really nothing about the guitar. Now, back on the topic of P90s, there was one other BC Rich that was ever made that had P90s. Now, this is aftermarket P90s, but this one actually came with them. It was back when BC Rich tried to rival the PRS market. It was the boutique high-end, but not metal guitars that everybody was so used to seeing BC Rich do. The model was called the Exclusive. There were a number of variants, but one of them came stock with P90 pickups. Victor Smith, who was responsible for the invention of the pickup on the guitar, even had a signature model of it. It's a very strange and very rare BC Rich, and they didn't sell well either, because again, BC Rich, as much as they might try, are a metal and hard rock guitar. They're pointy. Even this 70s classic shape, it's pointy enough, but I've used this for classic rock and blues playing, so it doesn't have to be a metal guitar. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't really matter what the brand name is, and it's much more about how it sounds and how you play it, and sometimes we forget that. Oh my god, I hate these tuners. So that's the video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and let me know in the comments below if you've played a BC Rich, and especially if you've played different genres other than the heavier variety on it, and how did it play? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!